Origins of Vulcan, an Omega-level mutant. Some of the most formidable antagonists in comic book history have appeared in the universe of Marvel's X-Men. Professor X's brand of heroes has faced off against many such formidable foes with godlike powers, and today we are going to talk about one similar Omega-class mutant, Vulcan. Vulcan, the estranged brother of Cyclops and Havoc, is one such supervillain. The intricate origin of Vulcan, who made his debut in X-Men Deadly Genesis by Ed Brubaker and Trevor Hairsine, fits nicely with the Summers family, whose ancestry encompasses time travel, parallel universes, and cloning. So, without further ado, let's jump right into the video to learn more about Vulcan. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Christopher and Catherine Summers, the parents of Cyclops and Havoc, had Vulcan as their unborn child on the Shi'ar throne world. When the Summers were taken hostage by D'Ken, Magister of the Shi'ar Imperium, Catherine was already pregnant. When the insane D'Ken finally murdered Catherine in revenge for Corsair's effort to flee, the unborn child appeared to have been slain. It was decided to remove the fetus from Catherine's dead body and deposit it in an incubator that was used to create slaves. The youngster had reached the height of adolescence as a result. He was sent to Earth to work as a slave for Eric the Red, the Emperor's representative on the planet, but escaped and was discovered by Moira MacTaggart with little to no recollection of his past. She adopted him as a ward and trained him in the use of his developing abilities. He claimed to be Gabriel, but he used the codename Kid Vulcan, which he got from Roman mythology. During one meeting with Charles Xavier, he identified Vulcan's mental imprint as being connected to Cyclops, one of his students. Charles enlisted Vulcan to join a new squad of X-Men who made an effort to save the original X-Men from Krakoa, along with the other students of Moira, namely Darwin, Petra, and Sway. Scott was saved by Vulcan and his crew from Krakoa, and when Vulcan managed to injure the living island, the beast became extremely agitated. However, for many years, it was thought that the living island Krakoa allowed Cyclops to flee so that it might attract other mutants to feed on. Vulcan survived because of the assistance he received from his perishing companions. He returns to Earth from his interstellar exile to exact revenge on Professor Xavier. He kills Banshee in the process, attempts to murder Logan, and kidnaps Cyclops along with his daughter Rachel Summers. Vulcan discovers the truth about the mystery surrounding the missing squad of X-Men who were killed on Krakoa by subtly manipulating the X-Men using the powers he had absorbed from Petra and Sway. In front of the X-Men, Vulcan confronts Professor Xavier after successfully luring him out of hiding. He demands that the professor tell everyone what actually transpired with Vulcan and his squad. However, Xavier fails to do so after having lost his powers as a result of M-Day. Marvel Girl is ordered to join their thoughts by an incensed Vulcan so that everyone may witness what happened. Hesitantly, Rachel agrees to do so, and with Xavier as her mentor, she is not only able to unravel the truth about what actually occurred on Krakoa, but she is also able to identify a separate consciousness inside Vulcan's mind. Contrary to what was originally believed, Scott was not released by Krakoa to bring additional victims. Rather, Vulcan and his crew managed to harm the living island, which severely incensed the planet. Cyclops learned from Vulcan that they were indeed brothers, and Vulcan then sent him away on their jet to safety. Cyclops stared in horror as Vulcan and his team were presumably slain by the living island as the aircraft took flight. Sway was struck first, splitting in half. To slow the time around them, her body discharged all of her mutant power. As Petra burned, she responded instinctively and brought everyone into a cave below the surface made by her power. Darwin turned into energy and joined Vulcan as both of them lay dying, eventually rescuing both of them. They were propelled into space by Polaris along with the Krakoa landmass and went into suspended animation. Cyclops came to Professor Xavier in a distraught state after Vulcan and his team appeared to have died, blaming himself for their demise. The professor thought it would be best for everyone if he changed their memories to forget about the second team, sparing them all the pain. Thus, Vulcan stayed dormant on Krakoa until the enormous power backlash brought on by M-Day finally awoke him. At that point, he came to Earth to confront the X-Men and inform them of the truth about the Krakoa tragedy. Marvel Girl uses these insights to enter Vulcan's head and free Darwin's subconscious inert form, which Vulcan then expels from his body. The X-Men take advantage of the situation to assault him because they believe he is too menacing to be set free. With the image of D'Ken murdering his mother blazing in his mind, Vulcan easily repels their onslaught, escapes the planet, refuses to acknowledge Cyclops as his brother, and heads for space. seizing the Shi'ar throne. He discovered that D'Ken was no longer the Shi'ar galaxy's ruler and was in a coma while traveling there. He redirected his rage onto D'Ken's sister, Lilandra, who was the ruler at the time. He discovered that Lilandra's sister, Deathbird, was in exile after capturing a Shi'ar warbird and its crew. In order to prevent the X-Men from approaching, he shattered the star gates behind him as he traveled into the Shi'ar galaxy, drawing the notice of the Shi'ar Imperial Guard. Gabriel was defeated by Gladiator during the battle, losing his left eye as a consequence. In the course of the conflict, Impulse was slain, and several other members suffered terrible injuries. He was sent to a prison circling Phigum on Takor's instructions. A secret order of Shi'ar freed Gabriel from prison after an unspecified period of time. They brought Vulcan to visit the similarly imprisoned Deathbird because they appeared to desire his assistance in restoring the true Empire. However, once the two started dating, Deathbird was able to persuade him to at least postpone his plans for vengeance. D'Ken's wounds were treated by Vulcan using his abilities. D'Ken then requested Vulcan to marry Deathbird out of gratitude. After his wedding, Vulcan tried to assassinate Professor Xavier by dropping him into the M'Kraan crystal, but this only gave him back his abilities and allowed him to kill D'Ken and claim the title of Shi'ar Emperor. When Corsair ordered Vulcan to cease the mindless killing during the conflict between Shi'ar forces loyal to Lilandra and Shi'ar troops loyal to D'Ken, Vulcan murdered Corsair. The strife between Vulcan's army and supporters of the overthrown Lilandra raged on. Havoc and the Starjammers guided Lilandra's soldiers as they slowly eroded the demoralized Vulcan defenses. Contrary to Vulcan's hopes, the Shi'ar were not content with having a foreigner as their king. This demoralized Vulcan, but Deathbird persuaded him that they would eventually welcome him. Vulcan and his fleet attacked Starjammers after receiving a warning that a rebel assault on Feather's Edge was imminent, but the Sayar Tal sank his ship, which was named Hammer, in the midst of the conflict. After being easily defeated in their attack on the Sayar Tal commander, Vulcan and Gladiator withdrew further into Shi'ar space. The eldest Sayar Tal was reached out by Marvel Girl, who also learned of their actual ancestry. The M'Kraan were the previous name for the Sayar Tal. Early on in their history, the Shi'ar invaded them, massacred a large portion of their population, and forced the remaining members to escape for their life. After some time, the Shi'ar arrived on their planet, claimed the M'Kraan crystal as their own, and transmitted the myth that it was a priceless gift from their goddesses, Shara and Ki'ithri. After changing their name to Sayar Tal, the M'Kraan focused their culture on civilization on overthrowing the Shi'ar Empire. They transported a star to annihilate Feather's Edge during their initial onslaught. Vulcan then spoke with the Starjammers to order a brief halt to hostilities. The finality was the Sayar's primary weapon, thus the Shi'ar and Starjammers chose to destroy it in accordance with the ceasefire. The eldest Sayar prevented Havoc and Vulcan from destroying the finality once they were in a position to do so. When Vulcan discovered the eldest's power source, he cut off the link between the eldest and his siblings, rendering the eldest helpless. After the link was broken, the Sayar lost their organization, and the Shi'ar gained the upper hand in the conflict. The Shi'ar then started attacking the Starjammers and the Sayar. Vulcan blasted Havoc into a sun in the meanwhile. By deploying the weapon to position a star in the center of their fleet, Vulcan decided to utilize the finality to annihilate the Sayar. After returning, Alex resolved to kill his brother after absorbing enough energy to burn him. Rachel and Corvus engaged in combat, attempting but failing to halt the signal that would launch the Shi'ar invasion. Alex's conflict with Vulcan ended when the Shi'ar Imperial Guard showed up with the Starjammers imprisoned and threatened to murder them. Alex shattered the finality before he gave up. Vulcan stated that he would restore the Shi'ar Empire to its previous splendor once Alex and the Starjammers were in his possession. Expanding the Shi'ar Empire. In a vigorous campaign of conquest to enlarge the Shi'ar Empire, Vulcan took control of the Xenox, among other races. He grew fixated on getting Havoc to accept his dominance, which Havoc flatly refused to do. The Starjammers broke out of their captivity, hurting Deathbird badly and nearly murdering Vulcan, but they were forced to retreat to the Kree Imperium. The conflict between the two empires began when Vulcan launched an unexpected attack on the Kree, who are now governed by Black Bolt and the Inhumans. Lilandra was supposed to be killed by Vulcan, but the Imperial Guard saved her. One of his admirals intervened, telling him that doing so would simply make her a martyr and inspire groups who were devoted to her to topple him in favor of a comparable figurehead. Then Gabriel kidnapped Adam Warlock and assaulted him. Soon after, Lilandra was murdered while attempting to seize Vulcan. The Imperium immediately descended into civil war between her and Vulcan's supporting forces. Vulcan disregarded advice from the fraternity of Raptors and his admirals to fight for peace and go back to their worlds to put things right, and instead took off to confront the Inhumans. He discovered Black Bolt getting ready to activate the T-Bomb, the Inhumans' covert weapon. Vulcan battled the Mute King because he thought the Inhuman meant to destroy his dominion. The T-Bomb exploded during the conflict. Both rulers vanished in the ensuing blast, creating a hole in space and time that would later be called the Fault. In order to avert another civil war, Gladiator succeeded Vulcan as Magister of the Shi'ar. While she was carrying their child, a Shi'ar and mutant mixed with immense potential, his wife was subsequently kidnapped by the Providian. The explosion of the bomb, which created a gap into another universe, did not kill Vulcan. Vulcan was drawn into the maw of a massive alien beast while floating through the Fault. 3 aliens disemboweled him while he was inside to learn more about him and determine whether he would be useful. They originally intended to use both Black Bolt and him to carry out their covert schemes, but because Black Bolt eluded their capture, they decided only to use Vulcan. They opened him up and found a big fire inside, but they decided that his body and mind were too twisted and damaged to be repaired while still being valuable to them. They played with his psyche, dividing the wonderful parts of him from his genuinely twisted and damaged self. They trapped his true identity within his mind, only to be released through intense emotional turmoil, or when they deemed it appropriate in accordance with their mysterious plans. They sent him back to his universe, with his memories of this erased, appearing as a changed man with a completely new and different personality and outlook on life. Family reunion. Vulcan returned to Earth and reunited with his family, who had transformed Krakoa into a mutant state during his absence. Gabriel moved into the Summer House, a Krakoan dwelling on the blue area of the moon, out of mistrust for the island. Gabriel had a home with Wolverine, his 2 brothers, Havoc and Cyclops, niece Cable, nephew Prestige, and sister-in-law Jean Grey Summers. Vulcan's family embraced him, but it was obvious that his psyche was still severely damaged. He spent much of his time getting intoxicated with the energy constructions of his departed old buddies Sway and Petra. His family gave in to his illusions since they thought it was his mind's method of gradually mending. Gabriel had dreams of the Fault just before a brood assault on Krakoa, albeit the incident had been obliterated from his memories. Creation of planet Arakko. Even more visions of the interdimensional aliens and of Vulcan's time in the Fault start to occur. The visions troubled him sufficiently to prompt him to leave the summer home on the blue area of the moon, where he had been celebrating with Sway and Petra for many nights. While he was walking, he came to a little Kotati Imperi base, where they were preparing to launch an attack on Earth. He met them and made a sincere effort to persuade them to give up their aggressive behavior. Despite continuing to hold back, he defended himself when assaulted. Vulcan's memories were triggered from the root when a probe was unleashed by the Kotati, which caused his previous identity to reappear and destroy the outpost. When his companions discovered Vulcan, they helped him regain consciousness. Unknowingly, Vulcan's activities led to a Kotati invasion of Krakoa, which the mutant troops successfully defeated. When the X-Men and the Swordbearers of Krakoa faced up against the Swordbearers of Arakko, the first horsemen of the apocalypse, the troops of Arakko, the Amanthian Daemons, and the Summoners in the climatic battle of the Otherworld, Vulcan was present. Later, he and several other Omega-level mutants terraformed Mars to serve as Arakko's new home. Vulcan's mental state soon started to degrade rapidly, which made him turn back into his former self. When the Scarlet Witch's assistants made it feasible to bring back the real Petra and Sway, Professor Xavier and Cyclops tried to get through to him. When Vulcan's psyche was violated by Xavier's telepathic effort to persuade him of the truth, Vulcan killed them. The Summer House later made him feel uncomfortable. Vulcan announced his candidacy for Magneto's seat and presented his case to the Quiet Council after Magneto left. Hope Summers, one of his great nieces, would later occupy the seat. Settling on planet Arakko. After being banished from the Summer House, Vulcan traveled to Arakko and started harassing Shi'ar tourists while claiming to be the legitimate Magister of the Shi'ar Empire. He got into a fight with Sunspot and Thunderbird, but Cable knocked him out and took him into Sword custody. The leader of Sword, Abigail Brand, offered Vulcan a spot on her new X-Men squad, which would be active on Arakko and set a good example for the combative Araki mutants. Abigail promised to assist Vulcan in learning more about his abilities when she realized that she wasn't making the most of his abilities. Abigail urged Vulcan to challenge Tarn, the Uncaring, for his position on the Great Ring of Arakko, because she wanted an inside man and took advantage of Gabriel's need for admiration. Vulcan pushed Tarn, and the two countered each other's abilities. Vulcan delivered the initial blow, but Tarn rapidly disassembled him and mercilessly beat him to death. Vulcan eventually reappeared after reaching his full capacity, and subsequently showed up in the diplomatic ring. What makes Vulcan so dangerous? Having the power to control and consume enormous quantities of energy telepathically. Vulcan is considered to be an Omega-level mutant. Vulcan has demonstrated command of unusual energies such as the magical energy and optic bolts from Cyclops, in addition to the conventional energies of the electromagnetic spectrum. In addition to producing electricity, force, heat, and light, Vulcan has also utilized his abilities to tap into and block mutant energies, warp or disable huge quantities of various sorts of existing energy sources, and fly. His flying speed can even approach the speed of light when the planet's atmosphere is absent. He found a trio of starships proving that he could trace energy signatures over great interstellar distances. By directly absorbing energy, he may survive for extended periods without eating. He can also create force shields to defend himself when traveling between stars. He can control the electricity in someone's brain, and he can use other people's powers by controlling their own energy sources, but he has to be in their presence to do any of these things. He was able to use Marvel Girl's telepathy without her permission. Nevertheless, the extent of his power replication skills remains unclear. Additionally, Vulcan can transform energy into solid forms, effectively mimicking telekinesis. His eyes shine as he summons his abilities. He has been identified as an Omega-level mutant, with his abilities having reached that level due to ingesting a sizable quantity of mutant energies from M-Day. Vulcan may employ his telepathic skills in a variety of ways. The former Shi'ar Emperor Deken was restored from a catatonic state by Vulcan, a feat even the most powerful telepaths had previously failed. Vulcan accomplished these feats despite having received little to no formal training in the use of his mental powers. Vulcan can control other people's psychic energy without having any natural telepathic talents. Marvelous verdict. The character of Vulcan is an interesting one. Ever since his resurrection, Vulcan has been a boiling stew of rage and hatred, which is mostly directed against Xavier and the Shi'ar, but also anybody who stands in his path. Vulcan has always been headstrong and reckless. His hatred for them appears to have subsided since he took control of the Shi'ar Empire, and he is now concentrating on Xavier. His tremendous authority has given him an arrogance that makes him certain to succeed. Even in the midst of his rage, he plans out his actions to accomplish his objectives. With his emotions more under control now, this character proves to be a formidable foe for the X-Men. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.